Hi, my name's Gene and I'm Gadget Bear. This year Apple continues the good tradition of differentiating Pro and Pro Max only with battery and screen size. Everything else is the same. That gives you an opportunity for easy choice and us an opportunity for easy reviewing this phone. So what Apple promised us and have they delivered? Let's find out. Pro phones now have white boxes, everything to point you in the direction of a main visual change. And of course, no more plastic here, only paper stickers. We can categorize changes in this generation of Pro phones by 4 categories, first of them being the design. Camera block is even bigger now. Actually, I'm sure someday it'll take up all the width of the back panel. Of course, cases from the older models won't fit this one. Also, cameras are protruding considerably more than before, so the case may be a necessary thing simply to make the phone... Sorry, my flash turned on. So the case may be a necessary thing simply to make the phone lay flat. Bezel got slimmer, but you won't notice that. What you will surely notice, though, is the new dynamic island. Yeah, the notch got smaller by 30% and turned into this interface element. Even though Apple won't show it to you, there's actually 2 physical holes here. Bigger one for the Face ID sensors and the smaller for the front-facing camera. You can actually see those holes if you catch the light properly, but it won't bother you in everyday usage. Oh yeah, we have 2 more fancy colors. The first being deep purple. Actually, it's not that purple and changes massively depending on the lighting situation. And space black, which is considerably darker than last year's space gray. But the biggest changes are inside of the phone, and spoiler, most of them have to do with the screen. Always on display. Years and years after appearing in most of the Android phones over $500, Apple had the courage to do the same, but it's not the same at all. Apple's AOD is very different. For example, when you set the AOD on the Samsung, you have the ability to change when to display it. You can choose the style and the color of the watch or disable the watch completely. You can choose whether you want your music info displayed and how bright AOD do you need. When you set the always-on display on the iPhone, you can turn off the wallpapers, the notifications, or turn AOD off completely. That's it. At least for now. Also, it's not the different page as you would have it on the Android phones. It's the same lock screen you have in a default locked mode. Fast launch, weather, you set everything up once and Apple does the rest for you. It's beautiful. Your background gets darker and slightly smaller. It doesn't disappear by default. If your clock covered the element of the wallpaper, it will not do it in the AOD mode. Now don't get me wrong, it's really beautiful and smart. Always on display won't work in your pocket, on when the screen is facing the table, or when you're in sleep mode. If you're wearing an Apple Watch, it'll know if you get further away and turn always on display off. The sole reason Apple did this now is the new type of LTPO panel. It can support a refresh rate of 1 Hz, means it updates once per second, and that's 60 or more times slowly than usual. It saves some amount of energy. Of course, if you're getting a notification, it'll fire back to 120 for some time. But it's not all great. It's pretty bright in most conditions. In the evening or at night, I'd easily get confused thinking my screen is on when it shouldn't be. It's certainly not something you get used to quickly. But one of the main questions is how much battery will it sip being turned on. Let's test that. An hour with notification every 10 minutes with AOD took 3% of battery, and an hour without it took 2%. So it's approximately 1% for every hour, which is pretty power hungry. Brightness. New screen is much brighter now, 1600 nits, just like Apple's XDR display. Impressive. If you're in direct sunlight, it can get to even 2000 nits, nearly twice as bright as the iPhone 13 Pro. And actually, yeah, at sundown we caught a particularly bright light, and you can clearly see that 14 Pro is much brighter. Though it is worth mentioning that in usual lighting and without usage of the HDR, brightness won't change at all. Same 800 nits, which is plenty enough to be clear. 13 Pro was pushing the brightness really low on hot summer days. Of course, now in the winter we can't test that, but we played Call of Duty for half an hour with the case. Phone got hot, but didn't decrease the brightness. We measured it. Though in more intensive titles, for example Genshin Impact, it surely will. Also, 14 Pro now has two lighting sensors in the phone, facing forward and backward. It enhances accuracy of automatic brightness changes and, surprisingly, exposure settings while taking the photo. Dynamic Island. So, two holes in the screen and black pixels between them are becoming whole. Why is it so complex when they could have gone with one pill-shaped cutout and it would be easier and cheaper? Well, first of all, you have your microphone and camera indicators here, and now it's actually a whole interface element, and we have to discuss it. What is it? It's a shape-shifting zone, and it has multiple use cases. It's simultaneously a status bar for some apps, a place for systems pushes, and a place for small notifications that don't need a full-sized notification window. AirPods connected and you see it. Someone calls you and the zone expands while adding interaction elements to it. Face ID animation is also here now. AirDrop will show you how much of the file is already sent. Charging and low battery indicators. Finally, the last one won't cover up all of your screen. Notifications mode, timer, hotspot, and even coordination using maps. And that's far from all the functions in this tiny little smart space. Apple did it in a really smart way. For example, let's take music apps. Literally any streaming app will collapse to this small widget because of the way API works with it. System sees that the app is playing music and it does this automatically. Of course, the developers of navigation apps, for example, will need to do everything on their own. Actually, to reveal the full potential of a dynamic island, developers will need to work really hard, and it may take years. But Apple took its time to make it easier for them. Dynamic Island can even display two apps at the same time, dividing in two bubbles. Animations are amazing, even if you're just touching this zone. Touch zone, by the way, is all the way up to the sensors. Smart anti-aliasing, matching corners of the phone and the island itself. All of this is indeed amazing. This is the one thing that will make you want this phone the most. They've even added a whole new chip to A16 CPU. Its job is to make everything, all animations, as smooth as possible, Dynamic Island included. And I'm sure they worked on this for far more time than a year. Despite all of its greatness, there's a few things that I'm not happy about. You see, generally there's two branches of design: UI, user interface, and UX, user experience. Everything should be matching and beautiful, but general usability is of utmost importance too. And the notifications at the top is a great UX decision, but interactive elements there, yeah, it's a bad decision. You have to reach it every time, and it's the thing you can do if you have a 14 Pro, but with the Pro Max it's nearly impossible to do with one hand, and this zone will get dirty all the time, so either you'll have to clean your phone often or have blurry selfies. Also, I just don't get one thing: why does the microphone or camera indicators sometimes drift to the right? I mean, there's this zone specifically for those indicators, and it's not busy with anything. Okay, let's move forward and talk about hardware. The newest A16 Bionic is using 4nm technology, and that doesn't make as big of a difference in performance at all. In benchmarks, it's approximately 18% better than the previous model, but Apple also enhanced the GPU a little, by 7%. Anyway, it's pretty ridiculous to test performance on this. Everything works as fast as always. Games are responsive as hell with maximum possible settings. It's still the most powerful SoC in the phone today, if you're taking into account both optimization and the fact that Apple is still a few years ahead from their competitors in the SoC department. 14 Pro will easily serve you for at least next 5 years. Improved accelerometer and gyroscope are also worth mentioning. They used to detect a car crash and send your location to the ambulance and your closest ones. You can cancel it, and if you will not during some time, it will be sent automatically. 14 Pro can now connect to satellites in case you don't have any coverage. It's not for all countries, but still an important fact. Another thing that is important, USA versions of 14 Pro and Pro Max will not have any SIM card slot. Phones from the United States region now support only eSIM, which some carriers in other countries may not support. Also, if you travel often, it's much easier to use physical SIM cards than a bunch of eSIM. You'll have to use AirAllo or something like that. Battery capacity of the 14 Pro is a bit smaller than the previous generation, and 14 Pro Maxes is a bit bigger. It will work for pretty much as long as previous Pro and Pro Max would. That means Pro Max will gain an additional 25% of battery compared to Pro. We tested iPhone 14 Pro for a day. It arrived with 78% out of the box, and we've been doing different stuff, including a lot of the camera tests, which left us with 12% of battery after 9 hours. So you can expect nearly 6-7 hours of screen time on an average day. Bluetooth here has an updated version of 5.3, but Wi-Fi is still version 6, while 6E delivers much faster speeds now if you have a comparable Wi-Fi router. And the last big update is the cameras. Let's test them. Of course, it's another year with heavy software upgrades. There's a new improved way to take photos, including updated Deep Fusion, which now gets details from raw photos instead of processed ones, and Photonic Engine, a thing that improves low-light photos even more, especially if you're not yet in night mode. Here's the numbers. The main sensor is now 65% bigger. It means it gathers just as much more light. You also have a new resolution, 48 megapixels, but you can use it only in ProRAW mode. The main lens also became wider. Aperture is slower though, but overall it's an impressive upgrade. Flash is improved too. Now it automatically detects what lens you are using and becomes brighter or dimmer. Because of the new 48 megapixel sensor, you can now use a 2x virtual lens, even though it just crops the main camera's picture. Apple claims it's better than any of their 2x lenses before this one. Main lens is actually one of the two that got a really noticeable improvement in real life. But a paradox, you can't clearly see that in a lot of the photos. With some you will be pixel peeping just to see any difference at all, which no one will really do, especially considering modern social networks compression. But you will also have clearly improved photos. Wider lens is good, and the algorithms started to work for more contrast and feeling of reality. Long-awaited improvement indeed. Someone might actually dislike it, because now we have more unflattering facial details, but I prefer it that way. Of course, not everything is great. White balance is off sometimes, 2x zoom might be not sharp enough on occasion, but the worst enemies of iPhone cameras are still the lens flares. Just look how bad they're looking here. Overall, 2x zoom is pretty usable, better than I expected, and often better than optical 3x lens. But the best improvement here is those 48 megapixels. We're used to the thought that it's a marketing thing, and I didn't expect much, but look at the examples. Here's one. It's amazing, and it's taken in a bad lighting. And here's two. You can count every hair on the beard. When you have good lighting, it just looks like a miracle. Yeah, the weight is approximately 40 to 80 megabytes per photo, but for those who use an iPhone as a portable camera, it's unmatched. Ultrawide is not as enhanced as the main lens, but there's noticeably less noise and more clarity, especially in low light conditions. But yeah, some problems are in here too. Wrong white balance sometimes, bad capture of moving objects, and of course, flares. Using 3x, I'd say there is almost no difference compared to 13 Pro. New gen wins mostly due to the new algorithms. They're improving contrast and enhancing backlit photos. Also, the sensor is using real 3x more often instead of cropping from the main camera as it was in previous generation. Selfie camera got upgraded as well. Now it's able to autofocus and the aperture is faster. 38% more light is hitting the sensor. Most noticeable difference in real life is the ability to position your hand really far or really close, and the photo will be in focus without any problems. Use a timer and a bench if you want. Photos have much more contrast now, they are not flat anymore. I didn't forget about the video. We have a new mode, Action, which will stabilize videos both with hardware and software using the information from those updated accelerometer and gyroscope sensors. Image is cropped and maximum resolution is 2.8K with 60 FPS and HDR. In bad lighting, it will suffer from excessive noise, but in daylight it's pretty good. And of course, cinematic mode got better. Now it's in 4K 30, and that's usable even for YouTube, not only for Instagram or TikTok. We didn't get 8K, and that's actually fine. Modern TVs and monitors are 4K at best. 8K would take more processing power, would decrease the level of noise and details in your video files. In other words, 8K in phones is really unnecessary now, but 4K on iPhones keeps getting better, and that's great. Is it worth your money? This year's iPhone's Pro versions have many improvements beside the usual SoC and camera upgrades. For example, brighter screen, dynamic island. Now it feels like a much more polished device, more wholesome than ever before. It continues to deliver the best experience using a phone overall, and the software is stable and smooth enough. Yeah, there's a lot of phones better than this in some way. Faster charging, better photos, or a zoom lens, but if we take all-around usage, there's not many phones matching this level of customer satisfaction. I'd say maybe Google Pixel is close, but still not there. And it's again the best device for creative people, bloggers, mobile photographers and videographers, social network managers. No Android phone is as good with Instagram as any iPhone, even the cheapest is. It's good for heavy tasks too, for example if you're doing photo or video editing on your phone. It's not perfect though. Old Lightning connector, while we know for sure that the next iPhone will get USB-C, fast charging is not that fast. Memory options start from 128 gigs. For some people that's really important and they don't want to spend more money. It's a good thing iCloud offers up to 2 terabytes for your photos. In conclusion, even though iPhones are not changing that much, now 14 Pro is a formidable upgrade even for 13 Pro owners. If you have 12 Pro or older phone, it's going to be a warp drive into the future, especially for cameras and the display. Leave a like and subscribe if this video was useful, and if you want more videos, watch these other two, they're great, and I'll go make some more. From Slav with love. Stay tuned. Bye.